All right, continuing our digital painting, we have our blended paint layer. And it's making a big difference, even though it can feel kind of arduous and like it's not doing much while you're doing it. I always like to do it on a different layer because you can see the effect it has with what's underneath, right? So that was our base paint, 100% opacity. Our blended layer here, we warped it a little bit, so it's softened. And so how are we doing that? Well, we're using an opacity between 50 and 70. And we're using the same brush. And we're just observing it and zooming in a little bit more closely. Don't be afraid of vibrant colors. They're going to build up a little bit more slowly now. See, and if you need some colors that you can't find and don't see, you can always paint them for yourself, right, off to the side. I've got this whole palette off to the side there of the colors I've used already, but if I want to introduce some new ones, you're always welcome to do that. Now the trick is with digital painting, with Photoshop, to have all the programs closed that you don't need. And for some reason on Macs, you can think of lots of conspiratorial reasons for this, but Microsoft products like Word and PowerPoint really kind of eat up processing even when nothing's going on, and they can cause a lot of problems, though you need them all the time. So if they're open on your computer, and we have had students doing presentations, so it might be very well likely that PowerPoint is open in your dock. Go ahead and quit them. I want to leave preview open just so I can show you that Fiesta Metal contest still. And basically only have the programs open that you need. And that should help. Also, always save your work. So just hit Command S every once in a while. And lastly, you can go to Photoshop Preferences, go to Performance, and when you're doing digital painting, you want your ideal range for use of RAM to be around 80% of the available RAM of your machine. That's for our studio computers. We don't have like personal assistants or smart speakers or anything attached running in the background. We should be able to commit up to, I'd say, even 85% of our working memory towards this. And that's going to keep your brush staying with you, even when you're doing it at lower opacities. Now, why does that matter? Well, because you don't want it to lag. You want it to feel predictable. Art tools are only good when they're predictable. And I'm just using Option to steal colors, but now because it's a slightly lower opacity, I'm getting lots of nice mixes of those colors. And every once in a while, introducing some new colors into it, like that shocking pink. Because it's not so shocking when it's put in at that lower opacity and then blended with the colors around. Now I want to frame the lips a little bit. Now, the danger of the blended paint layer is we tend to only paint where we're interested in the surface. So we often do it around the eyes. We probably don't do as much as we should in some of the more boring places around the face. So make sure you're trying to cover all of that base painting layer with your low opacity paint. And there's really no great shortcut for it. You can do a lot of kind of compositing things. We can play with the color temperature, and we can steal textures and bring them in, but it really just comes down to building it with patience. But I do really recommend getting lots of color in there, going away from just duotone, just the lights and darks of the local color. I really see the potential of painting as being able to use all the colors kind of everywhere. And as you make these decisions, even with this low opacity brush, it starts to sharpen your image more and more. Now remember, even what looks like black has color. And you can play with warms and cools. And whenever you feel the computer lagging a little bit, you just save. And when it gets quite bad, you restart to clear the cache. Just restart Photoshop. I'm going to put that slight separation in her mouth, and then I'll put just some little bit of highlight for teeth. Just a little bit. But again, soft edges are your friend. And really pay attention to your shadow shapes. So a lot of squinting. And if you have good reference, then you have kind of a good sense of the lighting. Now, because you're just working in little isolated areas, it can feel like not much is happening. And then if you need it even more smooth, like in certain parts of her skin, I might want to smooth it out even more. You just go to an even lower opacity. So now I'm at like a 30% opacity. And now the color shifts will be even more slight. And where I have too much cool color, I want to bring in some very slight warmth. I want to have a little bit of cool in each shadow. That's just the color theory of it. But mostly I'm trying to match the gray values. And honestly, I find it's good not to try to do too much in one sitting, because otherwise you get kind of stuck on certain areas and you don't really see the whole picture as well as if you take breaks, work on something else, and then come back to it. All right. So big difference. It's getting there. We always have the navigator open so we can see it from different depths and distances. All right. And save your work as you hit some of those steps. Come on. Okay, so I am now going to switch to another Photoshop project, to the Corgi one, and just show you that whole blended layer thing again, because it's different for different types of textures. So we have skin texture there, hair. Notice I haven't done the neck at all. I really should carry that all forward. But notice how if you just look at the blended layer, that's all I did. I just covered those areas, and ultimately you want to be able to touch on everything. But you can see how that's starting to model the form much more believably. In order to clear the cache on Photoshop, I'm also going to get rid of preview, which can be really memory hungry. I think I can close Firefox as well. And heck, I'll even click Chrome. So let's go all in. Photoshop's the only thing running. Of course, I'm also recording the screen, which takes a little bit more memory. And there's obviously a ton of different ways to finish off a digital painting. You can see from that handout, different levels of abstraction. From these caricatures, different levels of stylization. I'm obviously using a lot of color. So with my Corgi, I just want it to feel kind of energetic and fun. And I'm basing it off of the pop art of the West Coast pop artist Wayne Thiebaud, who has lots and lots of interesting uses of color theory in his work. And they're often built around warms and cools. So this time, as I open it up, I'm also going to open up one of his paintings. It doesn't matter how large it is. This is just color reference. I'm going to open that up in Photoshop. And I'm going to keep it as kind of a palette outside of my painting. And you'll see how that arrangement's just a little bit different than what I was doing with the Nina Simone portrait, where I just brought reference into the image itself. Now, how you set up your files matters. You can make multiple brushes if you like. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this color reference, which is all about color. You see all those lines, all those textures. This would be a nice level of finish that I would want from my Corgi digital painting. I'm going to put them side by side, and then I'm going to go to Window and Arrange and say 2 up vertical. And that way I can have them side by side, so I can steal color from this very easily. And still get a lot of working space for my digital painting. Now I might also do that with the Corgi itself. So what I might do is a screenshot of it here. So Command-Shift-4, very handy, quick screenshot tool. Take that screenshot, open it with Photoshop now as a separate file, so I can organize it off to the side, so I can be zoomed in and still see it. So now I'm going to put that over here. And then I'm going to say Window, Arrange, 3 up stacked. Shrink it down a little. So I'm always seeing it. So I have my color palette at the top. I have my form reference, content reference at the bottom. And then I just move my my digital